Hello and welcome to our office hours presentation for today. This is Paul Hoyt, your host. Our office hours presentation is a relaxed informal mentoring program that we do every Monday at noon Pacific time. All these recordings, slides, and exercises are archived in the members area of our website, and all the recordings are currently available on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/Paul Hoyt. The reasons we do this is because we know that being a successful business owner can be a great experience, but it is tough. You need education, training, tools, and teamwork to be successful, and we want you to get to know us, because when you get to know us, you'll know that first and most importantly, we really do care about you. We want you to be successful in every area of your life, whatever that means to you. We want you to find the greatness, the happiness, the divinity within yourself, and then remember it, embrace it, and live it every single day. Our passion is to increase the survival rate, accelerate the growth rate, and reduce the struggle rate of businesses in America. And our vision is to help millions of CEOs and entrepreneurs accelerate their business growth while enjoying greater harmony and balance in their lives. If you find these office hours presentations to be beneficial to you, please pass the word. You must know some other business owners, entrepreneurs, or people who are just thinking about starting and growing a business who could find great benefit in these presentations and in the live group coaching that we have. With our office hours agendas, we usually have an in-depth discussion of a business success principle. Then we offer closing remarks, special offers, and invitations for next week's session. Then we go into open Q&A and coaching. And with the Q&A and coaching, we want to have a little bit of a contest between the attendees, so the best question or comment wins. So as you're listening to today's conversation and today's presentation, make note, if you have a question or if you have a comment or a topic of discussion, please enter it into the chat log of the GoToWebinar session, and maybe you'll win the free prize that will come at the end of the session. Also encourage you to join us with the Awaken CEO communities on both LinkedIn and Facebook, where we publish a business success principle of the day 4 days a week on both Facebook and LinkedIn. Although I have to say I didn't do it last week because I was on the road the entire week. And I also do an Energy of the Day posting every day on Facebook, and that's something that I never fail to do. I think we're up to 972 days in a row. Today's topic is the book Crossing the Chasm by Dr. Geoffrey Moore, which is one of my favorite business books of all time. I always try to relate the subject matter of the day to one or more of the key performance areas of success, and this is all about leadership. It's all about your responsibility as the CEO and entrepreneur of your business, the leader of your business, to establish an effective go-to-market strategy, and that's what this book talks all about. In the Awaken CEO system, we also talk about the approaches as being necessary for you to focus on 3 different levels of performance: mindset, methods, and momentum. Your mindset is your beliefs and your perspectives, your attitudes about yourself and other people. Your methods are your plans, your processes, and your procedures, your way of doing what it is that you want to do. And momentum is all about taking action and accelerating your velocity. And the message on Crossing the Chasm is about all 3 of these as well. Our agenda for today's subject is we're going to talk a little bit about the author. We'll talk about the technology adoption curve. We'll talk about the chasm itself, and then offer a lot of guidance into how you cross the chasm and sum it all up with the bottom line. First, a little background. Dr. Geoffrey Moore got his undergraduate degree from Stanford in 1969, and then got a PhD from the University of Washington in 1974 in English literature. And he was also an English professor at Olivet College. Which is kind of strange, because I don't know how he made the leap from being an English professor to working at the McKenna Group. I think it must have had something to do with the recognition of languaging and social categories and the way that we talk to people in different areas of our lives and at different stages of business using different language, because that's one of the core messages of Crossing the Chasm that you will see. He wrote Crossing the Chasm in 1991 and another very famous book, Inside the Tornado, in 1995. Both of those books are really essential books, especially if you've got a high-tech product. The insight that he had about crossing the chasm requires a little bit of foundational explanation, and that explanation has to do with the technology adoption curve. So hopefully you'll be able to take a look at this on your screen. If you're dialing in, I encourage you to look up technology adoption curve or take a look at these slides or the actual recording after you listen to today's broadcast. But a gentleman named Everett Rogers, in an article in a book entitled The Diffusion of Innovations in 1962, introduced this concept of the technology adoption curve. And it is a bell curve in which he said that 2.5% of the people who adopt a product first are innovators. Then 13.5% of your total available market are early adopters. 34% are the early majority. 34% are the late majority. And then he says 16% are the laggards. Notice that there's 3 divisions to the left of the bell curve and only 2 divisions to the right of the bell curve. And that is because of the difference in personalities in the first part of the bell curve and as a technology is being introduced to and adopted by the marketplace. On your screen now you see a little bit of a graph on how the curve compares to your total sales. You know, as you hit the 50% level in total sales for the life of your product, you've gone through the innovators, the early adopters, and the majority, and you've really started picking up the pace at which you are selling. Your growth rate begins to accelerate and accelerate and accelerate, and still until it starts to level off in the last 16% of the market with the laggards. You may be familiar with this S-curve that we now see kind of superimposed on the technology adoption curve. How most products start off very slowly and then they begin to pick up steam and pick up steam until they really start to roll for a long period of time, and then we see the growth start to stabilize or really start to decrease, and they get fewer and fewer sales, and eventually until they've hit 100% of sales of their particular product. What most companies do, by the way, to address this little turning of the corner whenever your sales stop being so prolific, is that they introduce new products. And those new products then are typically long about when you hit the late majority, or when you think that you've got to 75% market adoption on your particular product or service. That's the time to introduce a new product so you can keep the growth curve going for your entire company. Let's talk about each one of these different market segments for a little bit. First of all, the innovators. The innovators are the first people to pick up a product. They are the technology enthusiasts. They really have to be the first kids on the block to have anything. But unfortunately, they're a very small portion of the overall market. An innovator would be somebody that you know who was the first kid on the block to have a smartphone, the first one that you know to have an Apple Watch, the first one that you know, if you're this old, to have a DVR. You know, that really started out, and they take great pride in being the first. It doesn't have to work. It doesn't have to have a lot of benefit. They just think it's really cool to be the first kid on the block with the latest and greatest thing. From there, after you've sold a lot to the innovators, you can begin to sell to the early adopters. The early adopters are the visionaries. They're seeking a competitive advantage, and they really have to be seen as leaders in their crowd. They think it is very smart to be second, and it's terrible to be anything else. So they don't want to be the first kid on the block to have the Apple Watch, but if they see that 2 or 3 of their friends have already done the Apple Watch, they will jump on it quite quickly before everybody else does, so that they can have some sort of a competitive advantage. In other types of instances, say there's a new software package that's running at a particular company. So an early adopter doesn't want to be the first kid on the block to try it, because he just never wants to implement release 1.0. He wants to implement release 2.0, but he has to be the leader in some form of community. Doesn't have to be the leader nationwide, but he certainly wants to be one of the top 2 or 3 in his small community or her small community in order to adopt the technology because he wants to be seen as being on the leading edge, but there's too much pain to be on the bleeding edge. After the early adopters come the early majority, and this is a very, very large and significant portion of the marketplace. These folks are the pragmatists. They move quickly after it is reasonably safe to do so. They need a lot of social proof and references. They've got their eyes on the early adopters and they got their eyes on the innovators, but boy, they're not going to move at all until they've got a lot of social proof because they can't afford to. Typically, these are people who work in corporations or they don't have a tremendous amount of money and they don't want to make any buying mistakes or want to make very few buying mistakes. So they are very pragmatic. They only use something after other people have proven to them that it really does work. They don't want to be the last people to jump on the bandwagon, but they don't want to be first and they don't want to be second. They want to be third. The late majority is extremely resistant to change. The late majority are the conservatives. They're very, very cautious. They cannot afford mistakes either financially or emotionally to their own ego. And before they do anything, they need undeniable proof, absolutely undeniable proof. And it has to be easy to use. And it has to be an obvious choice at that point in time. The last group are the laggards. The laggards are the true skeptics. They really have to be dragged kicking and screaming into the fold and into the future. They're the people that are, still wondering whether or not they should get a smartphone. Or they've got a flip phone and darn it, the thing broke and it's going to cost more to fix it than it would be to get a new one. So I guess we have to go into the next age. Or I guess I have to get a laptop that has a wireless connection because nobody's got any of those cool cables anymore. These are the laggards that, they're the last 16% of the marketplace that you really have to have a compelling reason for them to change and do anything. So here's a dilemma that was noted by Geoffrey Moore in his book. Everything that we've told you so far is kind of the foundation. Again, this was introduced into the common knowledge in around 1962 or so, and Crossing the Chasm wasn't written until 1991, 31 years later. And here's why the book was written, and here's what Geoffrey Moore's insight was and his innovation was in order to discover the chasm and then to cross the chasm. And that is language dilemma. Here's the language dilemma. If you want to sell something to an innovator, you convince them that they have an opportunity to be the first kid on the block. Be very cool is the language that you send to them. This is really neat. Everybody will want to know who you are and what you do. When you were the first person in the room to walk in with your brand new Apple Watch, people will really, really think that you are cool. Who cares how much it costs? Who cares whether or not it really works? The emphasis in the marketing language is be the first kid on the block so that you can be the coolest kid on the block. That's not the same language that we use with the early adopters. With the early adopters, it's be a leader, get a potentially significant competitive advantage. We're starting to take hold. Everybody is starting to pay attention to us. You want to be one of the first people to pay attention because we have some existing market traction. We have a little bit of social proof. You still can be seen as a leader in your particular community and have the significant competitive advantage by being one of those first kids, but we've got everybody else who is already the pioneers. They've already got the arrows in the back. It's safer for you to come along now. And that's not the same language that you use with the early majority. With the early majority, you talk about it being the safe and the smart thing to do. They don't care near as much about a competitive advantage as they do making a smart choice and being seen as making a smart choice. So we're seen as making a smart choice after the products are proven, after other people have the arrows in their back, after there's significant market traction, and it is therefore safe to move forward. We don't want to be the last kids on the block to do it, but we don't want to be first and second. We want to be third after it's safe, but there's still a little bit of advantage to be had by picking the product today. The late majority is the fourth segment. They don't really care about whether it being safe and smart to do. They only want to use something that's easy, and they don't want to be seen as being, really, really conservative and really, the last people to adopt any technology. So there's a little bit of a social pressure on them to not be the last kid on the block, but they're not going to move forward until it's the obvious thing to do, until it's extremely easy to do, because they are so very, very conservative. And the last group are the laggards. And the laggards say, I'm not going to change until I have to. I'm still on Windows NT, and I'm not even going to think about going to Windows 7 or Vista or Windows 8 or Windows 10 until I absolutely have to. I don't even care if it's in service or not. I don't care if it's supported. I'm not going to move until I have to, because the darn thing that I used to love and work with all the time just flat doesn't work anymore. So with this recognition that there's different aspects of languaging and different marketing messages that are effective with all of these 5 different market segments, Geoffrey Moore wondered why more technology companies were not successful in moving from the innovators to the early adopters into the early majority, and he discovered this chasm. This is the chasm of crossing the chasm, where somebody is attempting to cross the chasm in between the new kids, or being the first kid on the block, and being the early adopter, which says that we're looking for a significant competitive advantage, and in going to the early majority. What he says is that there's lots and lots of especially high-tech company that are never able to make this transition into most of the early adopters, because the product had some challenges with it, or the marketing messages had some challenges with it. And here's one of the things that he discovered was causing the issue, and that is the hype cycle. The hype cycle says that, when something is first introduced to the marketplace, there is a tremendous amount of expectation. This could be really, really, really cool. And you have a peak of inflated expectation about it being, it could be the latest and greatest thing, could be the best thing since sliced bread. I know it's going to save me millions of dollars, et cetera, et cetera. And then when you get into it, you find out that it's not quite as cool as you thought that it was going to be. It doesn't work as well as you wanted it to be. The upside isn't as large as you hoped that it was going to be, and you fall into the trough of disillusionment. The trough of disillusionment is when you go, wow, dang it, I thought that he was going to be the one. I thought that she was going to be the one. I thought that this job was going to be the perfect job. And you find out that, very few things in life are perfect. So you fall into the trough of disillusionment. And then after a while, you begin to pick back up speed into the slope of enlightenment, and eventually you hit the plateau of productivity that comes with almost every new opportunity and every new product to hit the market. The challenge then is getting out of the trough of disillusionment and into the slope of enlightenment. And it is that trough of disillusionment that causes the chasm in the marketplace. So here's those 2 images next to each other, that when something comes into the marketplace, the innovators are really, really excited. They say, wow, this is a cool technology. This is going to be so cool. I'm going to be cool. I got to get this. I don't care what the price is. I don't care if it's broke at first. I got to get this and have it. And then they start finding little things wrong with the product. Yeah, but it doesn't do this. Or, the person that I'm going out with, they've got this little problem in some way that just doesn't quite, it just doesn't quite meet my needs, and it kind of pisses me off a little bit. So you fall into the trough of disillusionment, and you have to have the sticking power and you have to have the benefit in the marketplace in order to cross this chasm into the last part of the early adopters and into the early majority. And then there's another slight chasm going from the early majority to the late majority, and solve this particular problem. Now, by the way, this is not the pot calling the kettle black. I'm one of these people that gets really, really excited about shiny objects. I get really excited about the possibility of new partnerships and relationships, and about the possibility of new communities. And oh, what if this really takes off? I think most entrepreneurs are very creative people. We're very visionary people, and we see all of the positives that come with the possibilities of this new thing, whatever it is. And as a consequence of that, we oftentimes get inflated expectations, and we oftentimes find ourselves in the trough of disillusionment when the opportunity that we thought was so grand, actually started to look like work, and we had to put in our overalls and our boots and put on our leather gloves and actually roll up our sleeves and get the job done so that we could correct the challenges, or at least learn to deal with the challenges that was in the product or the opportunity, and take it out of the trough into the slope of enlightenment. So for you who are bringing new products to the marketplace, this may be one of the most significant diagrams that you ever see. How we adjust our language so that we can talk about the hype of the product and get these innovators excited, but then very, very quickly we have to change our language so that we can pull people out of the trough of disillusionment and into the slope of enlightenment, so that we can address and attract the attention of the early majority. Here's a little more on the problem. The early majority, as it turns out, doesn't listen to the early adopters. They don't even like the early adopters. They don't like the innovators. They don't like the early adopters. When you talk about it being cool, when you talk about having the opportunity to jump, to be on the leading edge of change, they don't like that at all. And you know what? As a marketing person, and as the company's person responsible at your company for delivering great marketing messages, they're not going to listen to you either because they don't like change. The only people that they listen to is their own peers. They don't care about, because they know that there's marketing spin on everything. They don't care about those people who risk lots of time and money by wanting to be the first kid on the block. The only people they care about are their peers. They want to be seen as being smart, and they want to be seen as making safe choices in their community of peers, and usually within their own corporation. They absolutely have to have proven benefits because they are change averse and they are risk averse. So how do we cross the chasm? How do we attract the attention of the early majority people if they won't listen to the innovators and the early adopters? How do we shift our marketing messages from being the marketing messages that appeal to the innovators and the early adopters to being the marketing messages that appeal to the early majority? Here's how we do it. When we cross the chasm, number one thing that we have to make sure of is the product absolutely has to work. The service absolutely has to work. The experience has to live up to most of its expectations. It has to be something that is undeniably delivering value to the marketplace, because you have to deliver value, and more than that, you have to prove that you have delivered value to the marketplace. You have to have social proof and great references in order to reach the mass market, and you may even have to buy your way into the door. You may have to buy your way into the party as opposed to crashing the party. You may have to fake it until you make it, which is a risky strategy, but it can work whenever it comes to crossing the chasm in order to appeal to the early majority. Remember, these are the people that are a little more conservative. These people want to be seen as being smart, but they don't want to be ever seen. They don't want to take the risk as being seen as being stupid. So they have to be like 90-95% sure something is going to work before they will ever take the chance of purchasing it. User friendliness is essential to this crowd and to the late majority. It has to be very easy to use. It has to be easy to implement. You have to have a total solution. And here's a big hint for you. The more pain there is, the easier it is to cross the chasm. Now, why is that? The more pain there is, the more motivated somebody is, the more inspired somebody is to take a chance, to take a risk, because there is tremendous risk inherent in actually staying where they are. So the more pain that you can find in the marketplace, the easier it is to cross the chasm, and the more willing the early majority and the late majority will be to adopt your product, your service, your experience into their company culture, because they see the potential of it relieving a lot of pain. To cross the chasm, we must assemble an invasion force. In other words, we have to muster all of our resources to create a total solution. We want to dominate a very small marketplace and establish a beachhead in order to leverage your marketing dollars. And this, by the way, is one of the most significant points of the book as well. And that is the concept of leveraging your marketing dollars. If you have a marketing budget this year of $100,000 or so, you do not have a prayer of being able to capture nationwide attention. $100,000 won't even buy you enough social media partners in order to capture a little bit of buzz. $100,000 isn't anywhere close to the $3 to $5 million in a nationwide advertising budget that was true just a few years ago about being the amount of money that you needed to establish a brand awareness nationwide, to be able to buy all of the commercials necessary on radio, TV, and print in order to become seen as an acceptable solution, an acceptable company nationwide. By the way, I think that $3 to $5 million number has been reduced a bit with the advent of social media. I think it may be down in the $1.5 million to $2 million number in order to establish a presence, because of the power of social media and the power of very specifically demographic targeted marketing and psychographic targeted marketing that enables us to reduce our marketing costs quite a bit. But it still takes a lot. So if you have just a few marketing dollars, your only hope is to establish a very small niche, to understand where your invasion point is, to muster all of your marketing dollars, and to go after a very small market in a very particular market niche so that you can leverage your marketing dollars. And by leveraging your marketing dollars, we want you to get from the point of nobody knows who you are to where you're consistently getting word-of-mouth referrals as quickly as possible. Because when you can get to word-of-mouth referrals, when people know who you are and they trust your product and services, you almost by definition don't have to pay any marketing fees for that brand awareness and for those leads. You might choose to pay referral fees and affiliate fees to those people who bring you new customers, but the cost of that is significantly less than trying to gather attention through radio, TV, print, and even social media advertising. So in order to cross the chasm, we want to get to the early majority as quickly as possible, get to the point to where we are having word-of-mouth referrals, and the way that we do that is we capture all of the early adopters. We get the buzz going around all of the people who want to be seen as leaders in their marketplace, amongst all of the people who want to have a chance at having that significant competitive advantage. And we do that by picking an invasion point, a very small one, by leveraging our marketing dollars, and by going for it. Here's a bonus to you. In a later work by Geoffrey Moore, he offered a Chasm checklist. And here is the Chasm checklist that I invite you to use for yourself whenever you're looking at penetrating a new market with a new product or service. First of all is know your target customer. It's kind of like a no-brainer, but you have to know who your target customer is, not just whether they're an early adopter or an innovator, but exactly what it is, exactly the way that they like to be reached, and the messages that they really like to see, and exactly the value that you believe that you can bring to them, because you have to give them a compelling reason to buy your product. They really oftentimes want a total solution. They don't want to try to figure it out for themselves, because anytime that we go to figure it out for ourselves, we're seeing a little bit of risk that we might screw something up. So the safer the product is, the easier it is to cross the chasm. It's great to have partners and allies because of the credibility that gives you and the assistance that it gives you in offering a total solution. You need to develop your sales channels, price the product correctly, by the way. So when it comes to pricing the product correctly, the early adopters, the innovators, don't care what the price is. The early adopters want it to be a reasonable price, but it has to be seen as being a competitive price to the early majority, and it has to be seen as being a very cost-effective price to the late majority. And of course, the laggards don't want to spend very much money on it at all. So you do have to price your product correctly whenever it goes to crossing the chasm. That's why, by the way, one of the reasons why we see products when they first hit the market, like a brand new, a brand new 1080p television set, 5, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, you couldn't buy one for less than $1,000, and then it was $600, and then it's $400, and now you can get one for $200 or less, because as you move through the marketplace from the innovators to the early adopters to the early majority to the late majority, generally speaking, you're going to have more and more competitive pressure. Your cost of manufacturing is going to go down considerably, so your prices need to go down as well, because the early majority want to make sure that they're getting a fair price. You have to know who your competition is so that you can position yourself correctly against the competition. And after you have done this 8-point checklist, then it's time to do it again. Then you look for the next product, or you look for the next market, and you go after it, and you do it again and again and again and again. This right here, by the way, this 8-step checklist for marketing is not just for crossing the chasm. This is for any marketing activity that you might have. Knowing your customer, giving them a compelling reason to buy, pricing your products effectively, having partners and allies, being seen as a total solution, being seen as easy to use, all of that is really great marketing advice, even if you don't have a high-tech product, and even if you aren't looking at crossing the chasm. Here's a real bonus to you that occurred to me while I was creating this presentation last week, and that's with regards to applying the principles of crossing the chasm into the challenge of raising capital. And here's the insight that I got that I'm eager to share with you today. The innovators the people who want to do it first are like the seed round. The seed round people are your family and your friends who don't really care whether or not you're going to make it so much. They're not so much focused on whether or not it's a good investment opportunity. They just want to help you out. They make their decisions emotionally instead of rationally. And the way that we appeal to them is in a much different language than the way that we appeal to the early adopters, which is the next stage of raising capital. These are the angel groups, or the net of individuals of high net worth that want to be a leader. They don't jump in when then they can be seen as being a leader in their marketplace, but they don't want to be in that seed round. They at least typically almost always want you to have some market traction before they jump in and write you a check. Venture funds are like the early majority. They don't want to be they want to be leaders, but they don't want to be people who take a significant amount of risk. They want a lot of market traction. They want social proof. They want references. They want you to have accomplished a lot of milestones along the way. They want to know that you and your team can do what you say that you're going to do because you have set forth milestones and you have reached those milestones consistently over time. The private equity firms are a lot more conservative than even the venture firms, and they're typically the late majority. Private equity firms typically, by the way, and certainly the way that I use that term, are people who are firms and funds that buy existing proven companies. For example, you might have a private equity firm that's doing a roll-up on all the printing establishments in Sacramento. They notice that there's 10 or 12 small printers, each doing a reasonable job, and they figure that if I go and acquire all of these printers and we rebrand them all under a single brand, that we will have a much larger company with much less overhead and, by the way, increased valuation multiples because the company is large, and it's a very conservative approach. Private equity firms in general are not nearly adventurous and not really, they don't look for the high risk, high reward opportunities that the venture funds do. And then the laggards would be the other conservative funds. So the message here from Crossing the Chasm when it comes to raising capital is just like when you are selling your new technology, your new whiz-bang stuff, you need to change your marketing messages along the way because the mindset of your target market is changed. You also need to change the marketing messages along the way whenever you are raising capital, because the mindset, what your target market considers to be valuable, changes as you grow and as you raise more and more capital. So here's the bottom line. You have to understand who you're marketing to in order to create marketing messages that work. You have to manage the technology adoption curve successfully in order to enable massive growth, and that means changing your marketing messages over time. That's been our agenda for today. We talked a little bit about the author. We talked about the technology adoption curve. We talked about the chasm itself, where it is and why it is. We talked about techniques in crossing the chasm and summed it all up to the bottom line. So here's your homework. Get the book and read it. I mean, it is 30 years old. Well, not quite 30 years old, 25 years old. But it's still a great, great book. And who knows, even if you're in a more traditional industry, that if you understand the concept of marketing messages at different stages of growth, and you understand the challenges of crossing a chasm, when that's going to apply to your business, if you understand the concepts of the technology adoption curve, and you understand the hype problem that exists with many, many products and services, who knows when that's going to pay off for you. So we encourage you to get the book and to read it. Analyze your position in the technology adoption curve, which, by the way, may or may not be related to your stage of business, so that you can effectively employ great strategies that will work at your particular stage of the curve. And then, as always, get the support in developing your strategies and your messaging. We've been doing these office hours presentations for a long time. This is number 127, and as is usually the case, there are many related office hours that you can go take a look at for even further information on marketing strategies. The 5 classes of business, we talk about how different businesses have different stages of growth. That was office hour 66. Office hour 77 was a startup owner's manual. 94 was a lean startup methodology. 104 was how to be great at marketing, and 116 was on nail it and scale it, and one that I didn't put in here was marketing warfare. This is, and I can't remember what the number was, it was a few ago. So marketing warfare, we talked a lot about how we employ the tactics used by our military forces into addressing the challenge of being successful in marketing. And Crossing the Chasm is also a book a lot about marketing strategy. Here in a minute, we're going to go into open Q&A and coaching, where we invite you to offer comments and questions on the topic of the day, and then any other issues that you'd like to discuss. Tell us what your biggest takeaways are and the insights that you got from the presentations and what you're going to focus on. And as a reminder, by the way, best question gets a prize. And we'll also offer our support services here at Hoyt Management Group. Here we take pride in doing everything we can to help our clients accomplish what they want to accomplish in a way that is affordable to them, that is easy for them to use, and is exactly what they need at this stage of their growth. For some of you listening to that, it's going to be you just want somebody to kind of teach you concepts and principles. You want to know what to do and you want to know how to do it, and we're happy to help you figure that out. For some of you, the right thing to do is for us to roll up our sleeves and do the work with you, to become your partner, your ally in a way, and help you develop and write your business plans, your financial models, develop your product funnel strategies, help you develop your sales scripts, and work side by side as a teammate to you. And for some of you, the right thing to do is to throw it over the wall and let us do it for you. So we do offer some services in that way too. Whatever you need for your business, whatever you want to accomplish, our clients consistently tell us that they get more done quicker, that when they have us on their team, and we invite you to have that conversation with us as well. Our next office hours is going to be in a couple of weeks. We're going to skip a week because I'm going to be at a conference all next week. And when we come back 2 weeks from today, we'll have a live group coaching session. So save up all of those questions and answers that occur to you in the next couple of weeks and let me know what they would be, what topics you'd like for us to address, what other questions that you have at paulsurvey.com, and do your homework in between now and the time that we meet again. Now let's jump into open Q&A and coaching, where we entertain comments and questions on the subject matter of the day. And a reminder that the best question or comment wins a prize, and my contact information is at the bottom of the screen. Stephanie, who has been waiting patiently just for this moment. Stephanie, do we have any questions or comments from the attendees or any mail-in questions?
We do. I totally agree with you. This is one of my favorite books too. It's so critical that we get clear on our target markets, right? Okay, question 1. You mentioned that crossing the chasm crossing the chasm is easier the more pain that there is. Can you chat a little bit more about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that again. I think I mentioned a little bit of some of those reasons are, generally speaking, the more pain that somebody is in, the more willing they are to do something different, the more willing they are to take a chance and to make a change. If somebody is comfortable right where they are, complacency really sets in, and that's especially true about the early majority and the late majority. Especially the late majority, they're not going to move at all until they almost have to move, and it's very easy to move, and it's very, very cost effective to move. But the more pain that they are in, the quicker they will to move. So that whole curve gets compressed a little bit. The early adopters become a little bit innovative. The early majority becomes more willing to be an early adopter, more willing to take a risk because there is, by definition, greater reward. If somebody's in a lot of pain, then the relief of that pain is a reward in sense. So the more the pain, the more reward there is in relieving that pain. So with the higher reward comes the greater inclination, the greater acceptance of the risk that comes along with putting out a new product and services. So that's one of the things, one of the reasons you really want to look for significant pain in the marketplace so that you can compress that chasm, maybe even eliminate the chasm altogether, because you have a way of really significantly reducing somebody's pain. Does that make sense to you, Stephanie, and any comments, or on to the next question if you feel like we covered the topic?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that so many of us are either motivated by the pain or by the fear, or by that carrot, by the that positive, fun goal that we're all striving for. And there's no shame in being either one. I always wanted to be the one who was going after that shiny object instead of running away from the fear, but turns out I'm much more motivated when I run from the fear and from the pain.
Yeah, I think we all are. Okay, next question.
Next one. What about Apple? They have millions of people buying their new products. Are they an exception to the rule?
Apple computers, I did think about them a bit as I was creating this presentation, and I think there's two different stories with Apple. Number one is the story of the iPod and the smartphone and the iPad. So that story was one of, they just hit it right. I mean, there was some pure genius that came into there, into the iPod and iTunes and into the smartphone. And the iPad, I don't think was genius. It was just something, in between a laptop and the smartphone. And by the way, the iPad was not a new idea at all. Apple introduced a product called the Newton in the early 1990s that failed miserably because it just wasn't the right product at the right time. So when they introduced the iPad, they were doing nothing more than bringing back a product that they had introduced nearly 20 years before that was that failed then. It was more like 15 years before that had failed then, but was the right product at the right time in that particular instance. So when it comes to the iPod and the smartphone, I think it was pure genius. They really did anticipate an opportunity to capture significant market share through the iPod and the smartphone. And I think it was just, the market appeal of those products that kind of eliminated the chasm, from the very beginning, because they were just so cool, just so undeniably cool, that everybody, the people who were in the early majority, became innovators. They became early adopters and vice versa. The other part, by the way, of the Apple strategy has to do with the Macintosh. It has to do with their computing systems, not the smartphone, not the iPod, not the iPad, but rather the Mac itself. And that, by the way, I don't think has ever really gotten out of the early adopters. When you take a look at the marketplace, it still only has about a 20% market share. Windows-based machines and the other types of machines, the Linux-based machines, have an 80, maybe 85% market share. So I think from a very real perspective that they never did make it to the early majority. And one of the reasons they never made it to the early majority is because in companies, it's not being seen as the safe and smart choice. For so many companies, they invested so heavily in Windows technology in the early 80s and thereafter that the cost of switching out to a Macintosh has very, very little to do with the cost of the hardware itself. It has to do with the cost of teaching people how to use new software packages that were available or are available in the Windows environment that aren't in the Macintosh environment. So I think in one case they delivered a product that had such utilitarian benefit that it became, that everybody became an early adopter. And in the other ones, when it comes to the Macintosh computer, I don't think they ever have really gotten out of the early adopter phase. They haven't really gotten in to the early majority and the late majority at all, just because they've never been able to overcome the natural resistance to the true cost of swapping out computing platforms, which, by the way, has nothing to do with the hardware. It has everything to do with teaching your people to use the new technology, with converting your existing systems into the new systems to handle the integration, to handle the training, to handle the conversion aspects of that, and they never have been able to crack that. So very fantastic company, right? They're like the most valuable company on the planet, right? Primarily, I believe, on the strength of the iPod, the smartphone, and the iPad, not on the strength of the Macintosh. Hopefully that was helpful. Next question or comment, Stephanie.
Let's get a couple more questions in.
Okay.
What products are in the process of crossing the chasm today?
So this is a question that one early adopter might ask another early adopter, or one innovator might ask another innovator. It says, hey, what are you getting into? What's cool to you in the marketplace? Or from the early adopters standpoint of, what's the whiz bang out there? What is it that you're buying today that, I don't want to be the first kid to buy it, but I want to be the second or third kid to buy it. So that, by the way, the innovator wants to discover it for themselves. The early adopter talks to the innovator about what they have discovered and they want to be, the second or third kid, not the first kid on the block. So what I see today in high tech especially is around the Internet of Things. And it's not necessarily individual products that are moving forward. It's an entire industry that's evolving. 10 years ago, we started hearing about smart homes. But now, and 5 years from now, we're hearing about smart everything. Our cars are smart. Our refrigerators are smart. Our thermostats are smart. We've got a new product, what's it called, the Ring or something like that, which is a doorbell that you put on your front door, which is really wireless and connects to you from a wireless network so you can answer the door from wherever you are. Even if you're halfway across the world, you can be answering the door when somebody rings your doorbell. We're starting to see everything become computer-enabled, Bluetooth-enabled, wireless-enabled. Your shoes are starting to be smart. Soon your clothing is going to be smart. Your hat's going to be smart. Your bicycle's going to be smart. Everything is going to have a wireless connection or a Bluetooth connection back to the Internet. The Internet of Things is right now in that innovator early adopter place, but very, very quickly it's going to hit the early majority. Very quickly we won't even think about buying a house unless the house is a smart house, unless it's got the right doorbell with it, unless it's got the right power system with it, unless it's got the right HVAC controls with it, unless it's got a smart refrigerator and a dishwasher that talks to us. That's what I think is really a huge early adopter curve. But let me talk about one more that I see that's coming out, and that is the hybrid technology in automobiles, or the battery-driven vehicle. The all-electric cars. At first, it was something that was tremendously new with the Honda Insight and the Toyota Prius. Now they've been on the marketplace for what, 10 or 12 years, maybe longer than that, and they're starting to be commonplace. Tesla with their all-electric sports car was innovative like crazy just a few years ago, but they just announced their Model S and got, what was it, 400,000 people signed up to put up a down payment for that car. That's very, very quickly moving from the early adopter phase into the early majority phase. And I think pretty soon, like within 5 years, that if you're a two-car household, one of them is going to be an electric car or at least a hybrid car, because that's the car that you're going to take around on short little trips, and it's going to be very smart for you to do that, and it's going to be very acceptable for you to do that. So those are the two things that I see right now, is all electric vehicles and the Internet of Things as being technologies and industries that are in the process of crossing that chasm into the early majority marketplace. Make sense, Steffi?
Yep.
Okay. We got 12:58. We got time for maybe one more question, and then we'll announce our winner for the day. You got one more?
Yes, here's one. Here's one from Chris. You mentioned that fake it till you make it strategy is pretty risky. What are the dangers in that approach?
Well, I think there's two significant dangers in the fake it till you make it. Well, one of them, of course, is being seen that you're faking it. So if you run out of resources to fake it, for example, you decide to go to a conference and pretend that you're a big shot, and you decide to be somebody that wants to be seen as a very wealthy and influential person. You go out and buy a suit, your only suit, and you go out and you get a whole bunch of cash. So for the first 2 or 3 days of the conference, you're seen as somebody who's freewheeling and free spending and sharp dresser, etc. But if you drop something on your suit, or if you run out of cash, people are very quickly going to find out that you only had the one suit that you brought with us, and you did run out of cash, and maybe you're not quite who you said that you were and who you pretended to be. And so there's extreme risk there of falling out of rapport and falling out of a favorable attention with other people if you fail to pull off the ruse. That's one of the big risks. I don't think that's the primary risk in fake it till you make it. I think the primary risk is what I call energetic integrity and authenticity. I think if you're just getting started in the marketplace, then by golly, tell people you're just getting started in the marketplace. You can talk about how excited you are. You can talk about it. I'm looking for people who are willing to take a chance. I'm looking for people who recognize the value in what I have and are willing to be one of those first people to use this product in their community. Are you one of those people? That kind of language. It's very authentic. You're not faking it until you're making it. It allows you to bring forth your passion and you can operate in integrity, and you have lowered the risk of any lack of trust or rapport. Yeah, you're going to find people who are in the early majority or the late majority who don't want to deal with you because they don't want to be seen standing next to somebody that's just getting started. But you are going to find the early adopters, and you are going to find the innovators who really get off on that. Say, yeah, let's hear what you got. I'm willing to give people a shot whenever they're just getting started because that's what they love to do. Now, that excites them. It's a thrill to them. They're quite able to handle the risk because they get the reward out of not only being a first kid on the block, but the reward of helping somebody else out. So I'm not a big fake it till you make it guy at all. I'm somebody who believes in energetic integrity and somebody who believes in authenticity. And so generally speaking, I'm not a fake it or you make it kind of a guy. Stephanie, any comments? Or that's our last question for today. Any comments or added to that?
That's the last question for today.
All right, so the winner. As we promised, the best question or comment wins. Stephanie, I got my eyes on who I think wins the prize for the day. Who do you think should get it?
I like the fake it till you make it question. Which one do you like?
That's the one I like too, and the reason I like that is because it gave me an opportunity to talk about authenticity and energetic integrity. And as the founder of the Awakened CEO system, that's what it's all about. We understand that the work that we do on ourselves, the breakthroughs that we have in our own wisdom, in our own consciousness, in our own passion and our own love are what enables the breakthrough in the business environment. If you want to build a profitable, strong, scalable business, work on yourself in addition to working on the business so that you can overcome the problems and obstacles that you encounter along the way. And so, Chris, thank you very much for that great question. We do appreciate it. Give us a call because we want to arrange a free 1-hour coaching session for you or anybody that you want us to coach. Anybody as a personal coach or a life coach or as a spiritual coach in some way, or anybody about a business, current, future business opportunity, give us a call, arrange the appointment, and we'd be happy to honor you for your question in this office hours presentation. And with that, we're going to call an end to today's presentation. We're going to take a week off. We'll see you again in 2 weeks with live group coaching. Until we meet again, this is Paul Hoyt and Stephanie May wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Bye-bye.